Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be looking at the collected edition of Satoshi Kon's Opus put out by Dark Horse. I had been introduced to Satoshi Kon when a student of mine, I think last year, told me to watch his film Paprika, and immediately upon watching Paprika, I realized that that film and his work must have been a huge influence on Christopher Nolan and the movie Inception. In looking at that online, that seems to be the case. Like, he acknowledged that that movie is an influence. This work has that same, probably an even more intense type of metafictional look at reality that you get in Paprika and Inception. This kind of onion Russian nesting doll layers of reality. So I'm curious to see other Satoshi Kon work, whether animation or manga, and see if that's the same thing. This book is super metafictional, something that as I get older and have seen more of, it's less interesting to me. When I was younger and I saw like Dave Sim doing it in Cerebus and Grant Morrison doing it in Animal Man and a little bit in The Filth, and creators who have entered their work like that is something that's really interesting to me. It's something I tried to put to bed for myself when I was doing my parody of Grant Morrison's Batman. Something I just did for myself, Grantman WTF, and I was doing metafiction as well, and trying to put that genre to rest for myself because I felt like I'd been seeing a lot of it. So I come into this book like a little skeptical just because I feel like I wanted to be done with that personally, but it's so well done and it's so fun. Like, I don't know, it's just hard not to enjoy work like that. And comic artists seem to have a particular affinity for this idea. I think because can do it all by ourselves, there is this idea of like we're the god that can interact with their characters. So this book, Opus, starts out with what is really like supposedly the final chapter of Resonance, which is the manga that's being created in the story of Opus. So you get like some pages of Resonance, and you get the character Sakoto, I believe is the name, fighting against this bad guy, the Mask, and it's coming down to like the final battle as this series closes out. And then Sakoto's friend Lynn jumps in the way. It's like, let me take care of this. And she's some kind of psychic, and he's got some kind of telekinetic or telepathic powers. And then you jump to like just a penciled page, which is fun. And then you pull back, and you're actually looking at the creator of Resonance, who's the main character of this book, Opus. So he's a manga artist, and he's planning out this final page where Lin is going to get killed off while also killing the bad guy. And that's like the setup on this. And then Lin figures out that like he's going to die. Lin now becomes aware of the fact that he's in a manga, and jumps up and like steals the final drawing where he dies. And then the creator wakes up and sees his character like pulling the drawing and like, you're not gonna get me, and he falls down into his own creation. So I don't think that's much spoilers there. That's like the first 20 pages. It's the opening chapter. Like, that's the premise of the book. He's got pulled into his manga. He pulled into his own creation. His character's trying to preserve his own life by stealing that final scene, and then they just have to resolve everything that kind of comes from this happening. So that's the story. A lot of the stuff that I pulled out was just things that I thought were fun, things that you can do when you're playing with metafiction. The art's amazing. Satoshi Kon's an amazing artist. There's a lot of like Akira-esque type of imagery like this. The camera angles and stuff seem a lot like they're influenced by Otomo. This looks like it was originally published in Japan in 2011, so not terribly old. And according to the back of the book, Satoshi Kon died, it looks like fairly young, of pancreatic cancer, only got to make 4 movies and a handful of manga, which is too bad because absolute master illustrator and master of the medium. But some really cool scenes here where like all of the memories get blown out of the person's head and they're just like panels falling everywhere. I think that's a really fun visual conceit. And there's just a lot of play like that. There's another really just fun formal thing. This is probably, metafiction kind of calls for formalisms, but just a lot of fun formal stuff. Like here, they're they're like teleconferencing with their grandma, or their grandma's an AI or something on a screen, and I like that the lettering like fits onto the screen in this panel. I think she's teleconferencing with them, but the grandma's always on the screen. This was fun here. There's like these virtual reality headsets that are being put onto a lot of the characters, and they call them trance goggles. And I actually just like I got this book. My mom sent it to me as you know, with a couple other books for my birthday, which will have long passed by the time this video goes up. So no need to wish me happy birthday in the video. But Tori got me for my birthday the Oculus Rift, or I guess it's Meta now. It's owned by the Zuckerberg, so it's like the Rift VR headset, and I got to play around with that for a couple hours one night. Really cool, but also like just absolutely totally concerning that I'm like sitting there with these on while she's next to me on the couch, and I'm ignoring her. I know you can get like, if we got two of them, then she could have an avatar and we could be in there in the VR together, but it does seem like trance goggles. Like I put on like this meditation app, and I felt like I was getting hypnotized. And yeah, it just feels like Zuckerberg's gonna be the bad guy from this, that just hypnotizes everyone into his Meta VR. So I like that showed up. And there's the characters walk around with these things on their head too, that are being controlled by the bad guy. So it's making me reluctant to go put on the headset anymore. But I thought that was fun. And then there's points in the book where they get like too far into the background. I like this. This is funny. What are these things? A crowd, but I don't remember drawing them. It's like, right, I told my assistant not to waste time on these guys. They're just like these small background characters. So that's fun, like the consequences of like having a world that's not fully built. You know, when you do a meditation like this, it's all about like the characters encountering their creator. So you're talking about God, right? You're talking about a creator's desire to be God, and then the struggle of a creation against their God. And when you're talking about a manga, like all the creator has done is what exists in the panel, you know, and then maybe there's some that exists in their head, but the only thing that's been actualized is the panels. So these like incomplete characters, perspective starts getting weird as they walk further back in the panel. The buildings stay the same size, and so they get bigger relative, and they're able to knock them over. Just kind of all these fun conceits about a creator and their creation. And then, of course, at some point, they have to fall out of the panel borders into the gutter, into the white space, and you get them crawling around on pages. I'm actually surprised, and it's just like, God knows how much stuff I haven't seen from Japan, and God knows how much stuff, well, not God knows. I guess in this context, it's safe to say God knows, since apparently I've got a creator that's drawing me right now. But, you know, there's plenty of stuff that I haven't seen that's been translated, and plenty of things that haven't been translated. But I just don't see the type of formalisms in manga that I would see in an American comic. So this is cool to start to see some of it, but I feel like in an American comic, you would actually get them stepping through and running around on the outside of the panel borders. They're actually breaking into the gutter. And I was surprised that there's none of that. Even though he's playing with all these same ideas, they're all still contained by a panel border. You do get here where a panel shatters a little bit, but that's the closest to the characters really existing outside of the panels. They're still, like, they're outside of their panels here, but they're still firmly entrenched in the panels of Opus. They're just outside of the panels of Resonance. So that's interesting to me. And I don't know, like, if that's suggesting something, you know, like we're still in this book and they're just out of that book. Like, it would have been too much to have him running around on the page in his mind, or if there's just not a history of that kind of play in Japan. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have enough exposure to really know, but it just seems like a missed opportunity given how many times I've seen that kind of thing elsewhere. But I don't know. Maybe there's some reason for it. And then here, of course, we get, eventually it's going to go the other way. So the characters are going to come back up into reality, the author's reality. So here you have the main character, Satoko, coming out of the page into reality, which, having come off working on Strange Death, where Dave is speculating that, you know, artists will try and use comics to do magic to actualize things they want in the real world, especially women. That's funny to me. And that seems, I don't know why, but comics seem to have a history of that. Like, I know Neil Gaiman's talked about seeing death in real life, and Alan Moore's talked about seeing Constantine, and Grant Morrison's talked about it. So it seems to be this deeply held belief in comics that we can like pull our characters in and out. I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I don't quite buy it, but I do see a kind of mechanism for crossing between reality and fiction that's interesting to me. And then here you get Sakoto like in the real world, the world of her creator, and she has this moment of like the infinite regress. The problem with these type of stories really is, did someone write his world too? And that's to me where eventually I got tired of this type of story is um, you realize that it's a fun conceit, but it's just an infinite regress. Like, did someone write my writer, and did someone write my writer? And like, that's ultimately the problem with the idea of God, right? Is you need something to justify creation, but then because you can't believe that something could create itself, but then you go ahead and believe in an uncreated being anyways. And so it's either you you cancel out your own reason for needing to believe in God, or you just set up an infinite regress. And so, at a certain point, that just gets uninteresting to me. And I think actually, Inception, the end of Inception, handles that question well. It's like, look, you could worry about, are we in a simulation all day? Are we in a computer? Are we just in someone else's story? You can worry about that all day. There's not going to be an answer to it. It doesn't answer the question of how did things exist in the first place. And infinite regress isn't an answer to that. And like, you'll never know. You could get into reality, and then you just are left with the next question. Well, is this also a fiction? And so at that point in Inception, they just say, well, screw it, walk away from the top and don't bother to check to see if it's fallen over. And I really, really like that about Inception. I didn't understand why that movie was necessary. I thought it was just, oh, okay, well, you made The Matrix. The Matrix has been why do we need that movie? And the very last scene was like, oh, there you go. It's the answer to The Matrix. Like, screw all this Gnostic skepticism about layers of reality and creators. Like, this is the reality you've got. Just accept it and make a space within it and go enjoy your family and your dogs. And that's kind of where I started walking away from these type of stories. As much fun as they are, they're not helpful. They're not helpful in the end. And they're clever, but they're the same type of clever over and over. So this one's fun. It's clever. I would definitely recommend it. But in the end, I've just grown tired of the answers that these stories provide. But there are, of course, it opens up a lot of fun moments. Like here you have, they jumped in this car, but you can tell it's like poorly drawn. And he's talking about like, I don't know, I drew these in a hurry with no reference. Like I was just putting something in the background. Like, and this was like, let's look for something I spent more time on. And I like that. They're having to drive around in this funky cartoon car. So yeah, these metafiction are always going to be fun and clever, and they're always going to have formal tricks. So I always like that aspect of them. Then this makes the book extra interesting to me. I will give a spoiler away here. I don't know if this is intentional or if this is real because it plays too well to the story, but they have a bit here. I don't know if this was planned by Satoshi Kon as part of the story or if this is actual real world stuff. Because when you're playing this metafictional game, you're becoming like an unreliable narrator anyways. But here it's saying, oh, actually it was serialized from 1995 to 96. Sorry, on the indicia it says 2011. So it must have been collected in 2011. But serialized from 95 to 96 is his final long form manga before going into animation and stuff. And it says, although it's never officially announced, the series got canceled, but he worked on an additional chapter which was never finished or published. This chapter was found in his files after his death. It is mostly uninked and drawn in rough pencils. However, even given the raw state of the art, we feel that there is enough here to distinguish the characters and understand the intent of the story, and the family has given permission. So they have published what is like the conclusion to Opus, and in the conclusion, you get the characters falling, and then you get actually Satoshi Kon himself waking up and being told that Opus is being canceled. And he's like, well, I could wrap it up in one chapter, or I could wrap it up in 3 chapters. Can you just let me finish off the story? And they're like, no, you know how sales go. Um, and then the creator in the manga comes into the real world and meets his creator, and it sets up again that infinite regress. And it doesn't look like it ever ended either. It doesn't look like he finished it, but it kind of shows where it was going, where it's like the series gets canceled, and so, well, I'm gonna go meta, and can I please have this final chapter where we meet me, and I close it up that way, which again is a standard like out for these meta fictions, that are interesting and clever, but okay, we've seen it before. I remember Automatic Kafka by Ashley Wood and Joe Casey having that too. It got canceled and they just did a meta issue. And I thought that was really awesome at the time. I remember thinking that was really clever. That was like one of the first times I'd seen that kind of thing. And so this has that same vibe. I'm canceled, so let's just bring the actual creators in and bring the character in and explain to them that it's getting canceled. So that's fun. And like I said, I think that's probably all really true, but just the way it's presented and the way the book goes, I like the idea that this is all also fiction, that this is not real. I think it's real, but I'm going to choose to believe that it's not real, and this is actually, like, he didn't know how to end it, and so he just got extra clever and said, okay, well, I just never finished drawing it because, real life stuff. So it's fun. It's interesting, even though I'm, like, wary or tired of these types of stories. I really enjoyed reading this. I mean, the art is phenomenal, and the amount of fun and play that he's having is great. And I can also see like why he moved into animation, because there's so many effects that he's trying in here that when you imagine them animated are so much more impactful. So you can see his ideas developing, the type of kind of reality bendy stuff that was in Paprika that then shows up in like this, like the drawing coming into 3D. Like, it's cool in comics, but to actually imagine that happening in animation, or there's like cracks that form in reality that are on top of a lot of panels as it gets towards the end. Let's see if I can find one. But where there's like the panels cracked and the characters are like split behind the cracks in the panels. An interesting visual conceit that works all right in comics, but imagining putting that into like right here, they've got cracks. The characters walking through this reality as it's cracking around them, and here again, you've got that the cracked window pane, drawn really good. But imagine that in an animation or in a film, like kind of the kaleidoscope, a mirror world effect from Doctor Strange. It just adds up the intensity of the play with reality. So I can see like the type of things that Satoshi Kon wanted to do, why he would be like, oh man, animation would really be the place for me to pull off these type of crazy effects. So an amazing artist and a really fun book, and obviously I'm going to try and go get a hold of the rest of his limited catalog of translated manga, because it's all really impressive, and he's an interesting creator with a lot of interesting ideas, and has influenced some very influential movies and other productions, I think. So really cool, really glad for this. Thanks, Mom, appreciate it. And if you haven't got a copy of this, I would definitely still recommend it. It's just a really phenomenally illustrated book, and a really, really, really cool piece of work. Even if you've seen this type of thing before, it's still enjoyable. So yeah, definitely get yourself a copy of Opus if you have not. If you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel, there's 2 ways to support us. One is Patreon. That's always appreciated. It helps give us some extra money to get books with and things like that. And then the most important thing is supporting what Sean's doing with the Living the Line publishing company. So we'll take a look at some books from Living the Line that you can go out and grab if you have not already. Issue 4 of The Abolition of Man is a one-off story called Maria's Story. It exists within the greater world of the Hotech series that we built up, but it's a one-off story, and probably the most disgusting, terrifying, frightening comic book I have ever seen. Part of why that is we had this both written and illustrated by an AI. So we had one AI that generated the story, all the descriptions and the text, and then another, we used Midjourney to illustrate it. And it's terrifying. It's seriously terrifying. This is basically a story of abuse and sex slavery that the AI came up with. So quite possibly the most grotesque comic of all time, and definitely the most frightening thing I've ever read. Plaza by Yokoyama Yuichi. This is translated by Ryan Holmberg and is very large for a manga, so that's a really cool feature of this book, this standard manga size. And this is just a 200 some odd page representation of what Yokoyama Yuichi thinks of the Carnival parade, and he's just made this like relentlessly loud and rhythmic book that pushes all kinds of amazing boundaries of what comics and manga are, and we could not recommend this book more. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.